r/Nosleep. Posted by Carl_Sefney. My ancestor was an expeditionist. Here is his diary. Part 1. Hello. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Pedro. I was born in South America, but currently, I live in North Carolina. I come from a small family, from a tradition called Caipira, simple folks from the countryside. I was fortunate and dedicated enough to study and attend college in Europe, graduating in anthropology. Currently, I work as a researcher, producing articles and teaching to supplement my income. But what brought me to write here is that I've heard this is the place where stories are told that others wouldn't believe, and I definitely have one of those, or rather, not exactly me. It all started with the death of my father, 3 months ago. He passed away in his sleep. He was already elderly, and given the circumstances, I traveled back home to arrange the burial. When I arrived there, I found myself among some relatives, and after the wake and mourning period, my Aunt Zelia came to talk to me. She was the second oldest, after my father. Wrinkles weighed heavily on her face, and I could hear the weariness in her voice. She told me that I had an inheritance left by my father. I tried to refuse, considering that whatever the amount, it wouldn't make much difference to me, and it could be useful for them. But she explained that it wasn't about that. It was something that, according to her, had to do with what I did. An old document, yellowed and worn pages. I took it in my hands when she handed it to me, looking at the title The Campaign of the Flag of São Miguel, by Baltazar Pereira dos Santos. Apparently, he was one of our ancestors who went through expeditions, being one of those known as bandierants, exploring the forests, establishing outposts, and helping to colonize. The idea of having this material in hand, perhaps being the first to publish something about it in academia, crossed my mind. I decided to stay here. I didn't want to risk the airport confiscating it since it's a historical document and we don't exactly have any credentials for it. I even accept legal advice. However, while staying in the mud house that was my shelter in childhood, reading the texts under a weak yellow light, I understood that perhaps it might not be possible to publish them officially. Therefore, I will report here the excerpts from these expedition records as I study them, along with some notes. I hope the translation is readable since the language is old. I made an effort to maintain the original meanings and local names. Now, let me share Baltazar's words with you. Under the flag of Saint Michael, our patron, we disembarked the caravel at the port of the Bay of All Saints. The climate of this new land is milder, more pleasant than what we've recently endured at home. The wind brings a comforting humidity to the lungs, and the dense vegetation visibly seems to soothe the fierce heat of the sun. Upon reaching the port, I disembarked along with my crewmates, namely, Manuel Antunes, son of a family known for their bravery. His father was a soldier, and he sought to prove he had the family's blood by coming here. Antonio de Assis, a friar who recently completed his studies, a devout man, and quickly volunteered to preach to the pagan souls found here. And lastly, Judas Silvano. This is not his real name, but rather a nickname given to him. It seems our crown had the brilliant idea of sending convicts here as a form of service. This man committed a betrayal within his family, killing one of his brothers, and given the choice between the gallows and the sail, he quickly chose the latter, occupying the last place on our vessel. We were then welcomed here by the leader of our expedition, Colonel Dantas, a noble and brave man, known in the region for many deeds. He led us to a small local inn, run by Celia, a daughter of one of ours and of the local inhabitants, according to Dantas, skilled with a knife, not only in the kitchen but also in combat. We spent 3 days resting from the journey, during which time I got to know the small village set up here. There are many locals, a people with reddish skin and straight hair flowing down their heads. They are suited to the climate, walking with few clothes, gentle in their manners, and open to conversation, although they exhibit some difficulty in pronouncing certain sounds. It was due to one of these, Piri, if memory serves me right, that I began to reconsider my decision to come here. We met on the edge of the port while he was fishing. He told me that since it was a full moon night, hunting would be good in the forest, and he invited me to go with him to familiarize myself with the local beasts. I accepted gladly, seeing no impediment. When the time came and the sun had already set, we set out, walking along a sparsely carved trail in the earth, stepping between dry branches and leaves that covered the ground. I noticed that Piri walked barefoot, and I wondered how he managed it, considering the roughness of the ground. As we walked among the trees, we spotted an animal, large, robust, with a small trunk on its nose, called onto by the locals. Piri took his bow and shot, felling the animal instantly as the arrow pierced the front of its head. As we gathered the meat, I conversed with him a bit, wanting to learn more about the area. Here we have many animals, Dangerous on the ground, boy, or as you say, snakes. Some kill if they bite you. I'll remember to keep an eye out, I said. Is there anything bigger? Something that eats people? It's very rare to have one, but the jaisakure, large lizards in the river, and the iaguara, it usually fears people when we're together, but if they catch one alone, you might not even see it. I looked around, searching for movement in the forest, but encountering only silence and darkness. Fear crept up my spine as I felt something watching me. I made the sign of the cross, blessing myself until this omen passed. Piri, still crouched over the animal's body, turned his gaze to me. Did you feel it too? What? I asked. The heavy air. He stood up quickly. We're not alone in this forest. He seemed to hesitate for a moment as he began to whisper things in his language, the only word I recognized being Anhanga, repeated several times. I followed him as we took a few turns. Piri, the camp is the other way. I know, and he knows too. We have to go around. He who? I asked, without getting answers. We then stopped under a tree with a sturdy, wide trunk, which allowed us to crouch in front of it while the curve of its roots covered us. What happened, Piri? The Anhanga. I didn't know it had come here. Anhanga? What is that? It's a forest spirit. It comes after those who hunt animals with offspring or those who do evil. And the animal we caught had offspring? It seems so. We have to stay here and wait for it to pass. As he said this, a sharp, musical cry swept through the air, causing the hairs on my neck to stand on end. Is that cry from it? Yes. It will try to make us reveal where we are. I peeked over the root. And what does it look like? Piri, upon turning and seeing me in that position, quickly pulled me back. You can't see it. If you see it, you'll get sick, or even worse. It appears as an animal, but entirely white. Usually as a field deer, but sometimes as a bird. He stopped after that. We began to hear footsteps approaching, something crushing the grass, getting closer and closer. I could feel my heart rising to my throat as I tried to listen. My muscles and joints were frozen as I heard breathing, and then, my fear became reality. As I turned my gaze to the side, I saw the white silhouette, its thin and long legs practically glowing in the darkness. It had large, fur-covered horns and seemed to sniff us out. I held my breath, praying to Our Lady that it would pass without seeing us. Sweat started to drip down my forehead, cold. The creature stood there for a few moments, motionless, and then neighed, making that dreadful noise echo again, which almost made me jump out of my skin, and then it ran back the way it came. My flesh trembled as I tried to stand up, my legs made it difficult to keep myself supported. Piri seemed the same, beaten down. He didn't speak until we returned to the village. We both fell ill, high fever, trembling, and sweating, which mysteriously passed in 3 days. The doctor said it was forest fever and that we had to apply some plants to our skin. But both Piri and I knew, and I called him to the inn after we recovered. What the devil was that? The Anhanga, protector of the forest and animals. It was after us because we hunted a mother. It haunted my people and others in the region whenever we did something like that. Hunting animals with offspring, hunting the offspring, fishing during fish spawning season, and birds in the nest. It disguises itself as whatever creature man hunts. It would have been useful to have been warned earlier. I didn't know it was here. It had never come this way since you all arrived. We thought it was a good sign. The moonlight streamed in through the window. The expedition men went out hunting today, I said, looking at the dense, dark vegetation. Piri looked at me with fear, and I shared his apprehension when together, we heard the cursed cry followed by a gunshot. We are now here, sitting, unable to do anything while our companions fight with something that I judge to be otherworldly. May our Lord have mercy on the men's flesh, and may the day bring better results. Very apprehensively. Baltazar P. I finished reading this first entry. I don't know, but it seems to me like the perspective of a people, still somewhat mythical, facing something they didn't know. I'm skeptical, I confess, but ever since I read this, I've been somewhat disturbed. As the sun hides and a pale, dwindling moon casts a faint, almost imperceptible glow, I realize that the forest has never been as frightening to me as it is now. As a child, I certainly had a fear of the dark, or of who knows what, but now, I feel something more primitive as I stare into the emptiness that my vision cannot penetrate. But indeed, what changes my perspective is the terrible scream I heard about 10 minutes ago. My hands tremble as I look again at the worn-out leaves, torn at their tips. I reread several times to make sure, but my eyes definitely do not deceive me. while my heart falters with dread. No bird, and I dare say no person, could make that sound. And I just hope that Baltazar's fate isn't hereditary. My ancestor was an expedientist. Here is his diary. Part 2. August 22nd, the year 1610 of our Lord Jesus Christ. I woke up this morning without even remembering at what moment I fell asleep. The tension of last night must have knocked me out. Pierre was already up, outside, roasting 2 fish over the fire and handed one to me as I approached. "And the expeditionaries, in the forest?" I asked pessimistically. "They returned," he replied, not showing much expression. "Praise be to God. And where are they?" My sudden excitement improved. "Sickbay." Before he finished, I headed there, ready to learn more about what had happened that night. Upon entering, I found the colonel sitting on a stretcher, a long strip of cloth being unwound from his arm, and a new, clean one being put in its place. "Colonel sir, what happened? Is the wound serious?" "Don't worry, Balta, it takes much more to hurt old Dantas here," he laughed. "And what about the others?" "Manol is over there," he pointed to one of the beds where the man waved, a bandage wrapped around his head. "Judas is unconscious." I looked to see the scoundrel lying on the bed, a wound on the side of his body being treated with ointment. "If you permit me, what happened to you all?" Their eyes roamed around the nurses in the room who, though doing their work, seemed to be attentive to our conversation. "We encountered that famous creature, the Iaguara. Gave us quite a bit of trouble and then fled." He looked at me, signaling to disregard the truth of this account. I approached him as the nurse moved away. "I also saw something in the forest." He stopped, staring at me. "So, that time, you and Pierre?" "Yes, we saw it." His eyes scanned the room. "Manol, get up, urgent expedition meeting. Let's go to the chapel to meet Friar Antonio." Manol got up, staggering a bit, but quickly regaining his balance. We walked to the small wooden building to discuss the previous night. "What you gentlemen saw, according to Pierre, is an anhanga, a creature," I began, but was interrupted. "Creature? No, that's not it," the colonel said. "How so?" "I heard the scream yesterday." "We did too. In fact, we were returning here when we were intercepted by a group of men," Manol spoke. "They had white hair, all of them, but not like old men. Their skins were lighter than the natives, almost yellow, and they seemed to glow. We tried to talk to them, but before we could finish speaking, they attacked us, with spears, arrows, and a violence I had never seen before." "By God, what did you do?" I asked them, frightened. "We were scared, we fired our guns, and when our ammunition ran out, they attacked. If it hadn't been for Friar Antonio arriving with reinforcements, I don't know if we would be here." "Are they from some nearby tribe? Enemies of the natives who are with us?" "We don't know their name, unfortunately," the friar said. "I tried to approach the places where they were sighted, but with no results. They are known to us as Tatus Brancos, white armadillos." Pierre stood at the door, motionless for I don't know how long. "They are an ancient legend, but they usually aren't around here, at least not at this time of year." Friar Antonio seemed worried, his serious and pensive face reflecting the gravity of the situation. "Pierre, do you know anything else about these white armadillos? Any stories, any customs that might give us a clue as to who they are and what they want?" I asked the indigenous man, hoping he could provide us with some valuable information. Pierre frowned, thoughtful, before responding. "The white armadillos are secretive, difficult to see unless they want to be seen. We always avoid the areas that belong to them, but I've never seen them with my own eyes, until now." The conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of a scream in the forest, a woman's scream. The scream echoed through the forest, cutting through the air and causing everyone in the chapel to instinctively shrink back. Friar Antonio crossed himself, murmuring a brief prayer, while the others looked at each other with expressions of concern. "What was that?" asked Manol, his eyes wide with apprehension. Pierre was tense, his senses sharpened like those of an animal on the verge of danger. "We need to go check," he said, already heading for the door. Without hesitation, we followed Pierre out of the chapel, each step heavy with the uncertainty of what we might find in the forest. The sun beat down on our heads in the midday heat, causing the buildings to cast no shadow in an uncomfortable manner. As we approached the area where the scream had come from, the silence of the forest became almost deafening. Every snap of a twig under our feet felt like an imminent threat, and the air was thick with palpable tension. Suddenly, we spotted a flickering figure in the distance, moving among the trees. It was a woman, her dark hair billowing in the wind, and her eyes wide with terror. She was running desperately, as if being pursued by something or someone. "There!" exclaimed Manoel, pointing in the direction of the woman. "We need to help her." Without hesitation, we ran towards the woman, our hearts pounding in our chests. When we finally reached her, she was almost collapsing from exhaustion and fear. The woman, trembling and gasping for breath, introduced herself as Maria da Assunção, a native of the village of São Paulo de Piratininga, and after a few sips of brandy, she told us her terrible experience. According to her, she had gone out to gather fruits in the forest and collect firewood when she was startled by something sinister. "Believe me, gentlemen, when I say I saw it with my own eyes," began Maria, her trembling voice echoing through the clearing where we were gathered. "I was removing a stone that blocked my path when I came across a hole. Inside it, an eye was staring at me, an eye that belonged to no human or animal I've ever seen." A feeling of horror ran through all of us as we listened to her account. Friar Antonio made the sign of the cross and murmured a brief prayer in Latin, while the others leaned in to listen more. "And then, Maria?" asked Colonel Dantas, his voice heavy with concern. "What happened next?" Maria da Assunção took a deep breath before continuing. "A pale hand emerged from the hole, grabbing the stone and pulling it back inside. That's when fear took hold of me, and I ran as fast as I could until I found you." Her eyes reflected the terror that still haunted her, and her fingers trembled as she narrated her experience. We could tell she was telling the truth, as the fear in her voice was palpable. "Gentlemen, what is this?" asked Manoel, looking around as if expecting the creature to appear at any moment. Friar Antonio stood up, his face serious and determined. "This, my friends, is a sign that something evil dwells in these lands. We need to prepare ourselves and protect our camp. I will pray for divine guidance and investigate the sacred texts for any explanation of this phenomenon." We agreed with the gravity of the situation, and as Friar Antonio withdrew to pray, the others followed the woman to the said hole. With caution, we followed Maria da Assunção towards the place where she found the hole. The path through the dense vegetation of the forest was difficult, but the urgency of the moment drove us forward. Finally, we reached the spot indicated by her. The hole was a dark opening in the ground, large enough to allow a person to crawl inside, dragging themselves along the ground. Looking down, we could only see darkness, and a sense of dread enveloped us as we approached. "My God, what could have created this?" murmured Colonel Dantas, his voice tense. Piri, with his familiarity with the forest, watched the surroundings carefully, as if expecting some imminent danger. "We must explore this," declared Manoel. "If there's something down there, we need to know what it is." Reluctantly, we agreed to the suggestion. With a branch soaked in strong liquor, set ablaze like a torch, and hearts full of apprehension, we prepared to descend into the hole. With great care, we began to descend one by one. Darkness enveloped our senses, and the damp, musty air made breathing difficult. As we progressed, we could hear the echo of our footsteps against the rocky walls of the tunnel. Finally, after a slow and tense descent, we reached a point where the tunnel widened and branched off in several directions. We were at an underground crossroads, and a sense of helplessness washed over us as we looked at the options before us. "May God help us," murmured Colonel Dantas, his voice echoing in the tunnel. Piri, with his cunning, suggested that we continue exploring, following a path that seemed broader and more promising. With torch held high, we advanced cautiously, our hearts pounding rapidly in our chests as we approached whatever might await us in the dark depths of the earth. As we progressed, we could hear the distant sound of running water, and a sense of hope enveloped us. Finally, after what seemed like hours of exploration, we reached an opening in the tunnel that revealed a glimpse of light. With a mixture of relief and apprehension, we moved towards the light, and then, we emerged from the dark depths of the tunnel, now outdoors and within the dense forest, to find ourselves facing a surprising landscape. Before us stretched a waterfall, roaring with force, its crystal-clear waters cascading into a deep pool below. And in front of us, a trail wound its way up to a huge cavern, a vast cavern, illuminated by the sunlight streaming through the trees. We were awestruck by the beauty and grandeur of the place, but also aware that we were in unknown and potentially dangerous territory. We were about to take the path towards the cavern and enter it when my heart faltered. A spear whizzed past, narrowly missing my face. With a start, I stepped back, my eyes widening in terror as I saw the pale figures emerging from the shadows of the cave. The white armadillos were as terrifying as they had been described, their almost translucent skins gleamed in the cave's darkness, and their lifeless eyes seemed to pierce my soul with a chilling intensity. "My God," I whispered, barely able to find words to express the horror gripping me. The others also recoiled, their pale faces reflecting the fear they felt. Colonel Dantas gripped his shotgun, his expression tense, while Manol and Piri were alert, ready for any sudden movement from the white armadillos. Maria retreated behind us. The sinister figures did not move, but I could feel their oppressive presence looming over us, like an imminent threat waiting only for the right moment to strike. The sound of the waterfall in the background echoed like a mournful drum, adding a sense of inevitability to our fate. "What are we going to do?" asked Manol, his voice trembling with apprehension. His eyes were fixed on the pale figures before us, his expression a mixture of courage and fear. "Only option is to flee," exclaimed Piri. With the white armadillos blocking our only way out, panic began to set in among us. Colonel Dantas fired his shotgun towards the creatures, but the range was not enough, and it only seemed to enrage them further. Their shiny skins reflected the gunshots in a disturbing manner, giving them a supernatural appearance. Realizing that violence would only put us in greater danger, Piri urged us to retreat. "We need to find another escape route," he shouted above the sound of the waterfall and Maria Dawson's screams, which echoed through the forest. Amidst the chaos, we tried to orient ourselves in the opposite direction of the cave, but the white armadillos began to approach, pressed against the wall, and passing under the waterfall, their sharp spears scraping against the rocky surface. One of them swiftly threw his weapon towards Manol, who barely had time to defend himself before being struck by a spear in his thigh, his cry of pain echoing through the air. With the shock of the attack, we could hardly process the scene before us. Fear pumped through our veins as we desperately tried to find a way out. Maria ran over to Manol, trying to help him, while Piri led the way through the dense vegetation, searching for an escape route back through the hole. We ran as fast as we could, the sound of the white armadillo's footsteps echoing behind us. Every time we looked back, we saw the pale figures drawing closer, their sinister expressions foretelling a grim fate. The tunnel had become a labyrinth of stone, where danger seemed to lurk around every corner. The throbbing pain in Manol's side and Maria Dawson's cries echoed in our ears, fueling our desperation. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over us, making this escape even more challenging. Finally, after an exhausting run, we found a clearing where we could regroup and assess our options. Manol was pale and weak, his breath labored as he held onto his wound. "We can't stay here," Piri said, his voice grave with determination. "The white armadillos are behind us, and we can't afford to waste any more time." We helped Manol to his feet and continued our journey through the dark forest. Every sound, every shadow, made us tremble with fear. But then, everything quieted down. We looked back, we tried to listen, but it seemed that the danger had passed. Manol grew weaker with every step, his pale, sweaty face betraying his agony. Maria Dawson supported him, her words of encouragement lost in the twilight's clamor. We arrived at the village along with the last rays of sunlight, where we immediately laid Manol down on a stretcher, while the doctors rushed to attend to him. The tension in the village was palpable after our account. We informed the leaders, and they gathered armed men for an urgent council, discussing strategies to deal with the imminent threat. Piri, Manol, and I stayed in the village, tending to the wounded and exchanging information with Maria Dawson, who revealed more details about her journey to that point. As night fell, an atmosphere of suspense over the planned attack hung over the village. In the middle of the night, screams of despair echoed through the darkness, tearing through the nocturnal silence. My blood ran cold as ice, and I trembled, clutching my pillow like a child, muffling the screams into the blanket. Not only was I suffering from panic, but no one in the village dared to venture out to investigate, fearing what they might encounter in the shadows of the night. The screams continued for almost an hour, until they finally subsided. When the sun rose the next day, a warm silence enveloped us. We prayed in the morning, all together, guided by the friar. Around 11 o'clock, we heard footsteps coming from the woods. We aimed our weapons in that direction, but what we saw was a battered and shaken figure, with sunken eyes. It was one of the sentinels, visibly shaken. He approached us, trembling, and collapsed on the ground in tears, only regaining composure when the friar approached, spoke to him, and offered him some wine. He begged us to follow him to the site of the attack. Reluctantly, we agreed. Now, we are getting ready to go there. We asked questions, but the man refuses to answer them, and says we need to see for ourselves. The chill from before returned to me, and I don't know what could be so bad. A bitter taste fills my mouth. I can only hope for the best to happen. Apprehensively. Baltazar P. This was the second entry in the diary. To conclude, I would like to thank some messages of concern. I am fine, and the region where Baltazar went through these dangers is not the same as where I am. In fact, I am on my way there. At the moment, the train is blowing its whistle to signal that we are approaching. I can already see through the window on the right side the coastline, and waves hitting the sand, with the surreal beauty of nature. Meanwhile, on the other side, what passes by us rapidly are the forests, trees, and other denser vegetation, sometimes adorned with fruits, flowers, or some bird or monkey. I don't want to sound crazy, but I could swear I saw someone staring at us from the middle of the forest a few kilometers back. Maybe I shouldn't read these things so often. I hope to bring more things here for you later on. I plan to photograph the original locations of the story to give more life to the imagination while you read. Wish me luck.